Welcome back to Sandshark Customs, where if I can do it, you can too. Today we have a big one where if I can do it, you definitely can do it. If you're following me on Instagram or Facebook, you would have seen a picture that I posted yesterday that talks about an issue that I found with the intake manifold. So if you remember, when I took the intake manifold off, I just lifted it straight up and then set it straight down on the table. I never actually looked underneath the intake manifold to see if there was any possible issues, mostly because I didn't think there would be issues. But boy, was I wrong. And what we'll do right here is, let me zoom in on the intake. Right there, you can see, hopefully you can see inside. This is melted plastic. And it goes all the way in there and it's peeling off the sides and everything. I'll lay another image on the screen of a lit picture that I took of it. But yeah, that worries me a little bit. I'm not 100% sure why. You know, the estimate right now based on people giving me feedback is that it is exhaust fumes that got ignited going back towards the intake. So what my understanding is, it could be a few different things. I'm hoping it's just the EGR valve issue where the EGR valve helps emissions, where it recirculates some of the exhaust and I believe some of the burnt fuel or unburnt fuel back into the air system, so it recombusts and essentially burns cleaner. At least that's my understanding of it. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. But what I'm worried about is that it could be something internal that you know, ultimately is a big problem. So looking in there, I'm not sure what I'm looking at. So it was recommended that I go ahead and, I have to take out the coil packs, the covers, then we're gonna remove the heads. This should be quite the adventure. Oh, another thing that I was checking on when I was looking at the different types of problems that it could be where this is igniting the fumes back into the intake manifold is right here is called the oil valve controller, I believe it's called. And what it does is it just regulates the oil that goes through the system. So that's a pretty lame definition of what it is, but I don't know how to say it any better. But one thing I did read is that if I pull it out and there's shavings on there, we definitely have some more problems. So I will take this off first, and then I want to check for shavings. If I don't see any shavings, we'll put it back in and we'll continue this process. But let's start with that, and then I gotta take off more of the accessories on here to make sure that the heads can come off in the first place. So let's get to it. For the rest of this video, what I'll be doing is skipping to the important parts, but I do want to document each step of the process. One, for me to be able to go back and look at when I do the reassembly, but also to maybe explain further on the different things that I'm seeing or doing. So you'll find me down in the lower right-hand corner or left-hand corner, and I'll just pop into the frame and talk about a little bit of the task at hand. Enjoy watching. Okay, here we are back at these darn clips. So they're relatively straightforward. You pull the red back, and then I would just use a screwdriver and poke it down into the actual spot that makes it pop off. But these are the wiring harness for the MBS, which allows it to switch from 8 cylinders to 4 cylinders. I thought about doing the MBS delete, but I opted against that because I do know that it needs a new cam and there's more stuff that goes into that process. So right now I'm not looking to do that, so we'll move on from there. Okay, let's see what the oil control valve looks like. I don't see any metal shavings on there, and it looks rather clean. So what I'm going to do real quick here is set this over here, and I'm going to clean that up just a little bit before I put it back on. You can see here that I'm pushing in the oil control valve. I did put the bolt in first. I did not tighten it all the way down. I just wanted to get it to stabilize in one location. And then you have to push evenly straight in, and you can see I can do that with the palm of my hand, and then the O-ring does go in there nicely and seats, and I just hand tightened it down. Later I'll go back and torque it down to spec. Now I'm starting to take off the coil packs. What I'll do is I'll just go through and take out all the screws first. And the coil packs, you'll see in just a second here, they just pull straight out. And then I check them for debris or damage or anything like that. In this section, I'm removing the valve cover bolts. I don't believe there's an order to actually removing them, so I just went ahead and removed them. I could have taken the spark plugs out on the 6.4 Hemi, and I believe the same thing applies to the 5.7. There's 2 spark plugs per cylinder, and you can see the 8 right there on that side. So a little bit later on, after I pull the valve cover, I actually take the spark plugs out. Okay, now that we fast forward to the boring part, all the bolts are loose and I'm trying to pull off the valve cover here. I wouldn't say it's exactly stuck, but you know, after 30,000 miles of running and being attached there, they are a little sticky to pull out. So I was able just to pull on one of the corners and it does just pop off. And my first initial, you know, view of the lifters and the valves and stuff like that is, you know, ultimately everything in there looked pretty clean. I went into a lot of detail, digging in there and trying to see what, you know, any shavings, anything bent, anything that looks obvious. Okay, in this section, just taking out the spark plugs. I'll go pretty fast through it. One thing to note is I am using a specific spark plug socket that has a little rubber grommet in the inside that adds a little compression that allows you to, you know, really grab the spark plug and pull it out. So I'll put a link to that in the description. Now that the valve cover is off and the spark plugs have been pulled, I'm just going around testing the rocker arms to make sure that there's no excessive play. The push rods are connected to it, and then the valve springs are connected to the rocker arms. So I want to make sure that nothing is apparent to be a problem. So I went through, you know, you just kind of grab them and move them up and down a little bit, make sure that they're stiff. Then there's going to be, per rocker mount, there's going to be 5 10 millimeter bolts, and when I say 10 millimeter, that's the socket size that you need to take them off. I just went through, took them off. I don't know if there's a certain order that they need to be taken off on, but it didn't seem to cause any issues, so I just went left to right, I believe. Once I was able to get them loose with the socket, I just grabbed the Milwaukee drill and threw the bit on there and took them out a lot quicker. One thing to be careful of is everything likes to move very quickly on there, so as you can see, I set them onto the desk just to the left of it in the exact order with caution. Once the rocker arms are off, I start looking at pulling the push rods out. They're not really attached by much. I mean, really they're free flowing once you get the rocker arms out. I pull them out one by one and check the straightness. I don't see very many issues on this side. This is the bottom.
You're pushing them in there with the...
Okay, one thing that I'm doing to help organization is I have this box right here, and I put front, and these are the push rods, and we need to make sure they go back in the same order. So I just drew the diagram. I know that's front, and they'll go right back in the correct spots. In this section, I'm starting to take off the head bolts. So up on top, on the intake side, they're outside of the head. There are 5 10 millimeter bolts that I'm loosening up right there, and then I will grab the Milwaukee to speed up the removal of them. On the inside, there are 10 15 millimeter bolts that need to be removed. And I'm just using a bigger socket set to get a little more leverage. These ones are torqued down pretty tightly, but they come out relatively easy. I do take extra care removing these ones because I don't want to damage anything, and I just use the extension in the socket to twist them out all the way so I can grab them. This is the do or die moment. All bolts are out. Let's see if we can actually take this off. Okay, everything's apart, and yeah, I'm gonna start cleaning up a bit. I don't, you know, I know that, you know, with a little elbow grease, we can get off quite a bit of this carbon right here. I want to, you know, obviously get this gasket off. That won't be going back on. And then I'm gonna do some learning on how to clean the heads. I'm not exactly sure how to do that yet, but I'm assuming there's a process to doing that. Yesterday we worked on what would be the left side of the engine, removing the head, and I laid everything out nicely here. I did see this little trick, maybe it's super common in the automotive industry, but laying it out like this, because these rods need to go back in the exact order that they came out. At least that's my understanding. So if I lay it out just in here with the front this way, I know exactly the order that they go back in. I also don't know yet all the bolts that need to be replaced, so I kept everything in the exact order that everything came out. You can see that too. These spark plugs, you know, they do look a little bit burnt, so I'm gonna order all new ones just to be safe. So today we're gonna do it to what would be the right side. And remember that, let's see, this port right here is the one that had the burnt intake manifold port. So with that said, let's get to work. And it's gonna be, I'll fast forward through a lot of this because it's the same as what I did in the first part. But I'll show you the important parts, and if I find anything that's broken or whatnot, I'll point that out. We do know that one of our coil packs here is broken, so we know we're going to replace that one, but let's get to tearing this down. Okay, I got the valve cover off, and I'm not seeing any glaring problems. Nothing seems bent, nothing seems loose. All the lifters seem fairly flexible. I started working on taking the rods out again. This is on the, what would be the right side. And lo and behold, I don't know if you can see that on here, but we have a bent rod. Maybe you can. This side, tearing this one off, has the makings to be interesting. I don't know what we're gonna find when we take the head off of the right side of the engine. All right, the head is off on the right side. Let's take a look what we're working with. And I'm guessing that is just overflow from when we took off the head. Apparently it wasn't all drained. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that off of there. I'm not seeing any initial damage to the piston, but let's get it all cleaned up and see what we're working with. While I'm in here, I might as well check the rollers that are touching the camshaft. And these are, at least like in my 5.7, there've been something that has wore down or seized, and I ran into a problem with that. But on here, I'll go through and I'll check every single one of them, and they all seem to roll freely, and I don't see any signs of odd wear or anything like that. So we're just gonna keep fast forwarding through this and well, that seemed to be a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. But that's okay. I'm learning a ton. So what we'll do a quick rundown here. I went through, I cleaned up, this is the, let's see, so it'd be facing, this would be the right side. Now I went through, cleaned up all the piston heads. I checked for any type of, weird wear or marks of any sorts inside the cylinders. I did not find any there. I also pulled the rollers and checked. And I guess I don't know what these are fully called, but I'll just call them rollers because they have little rollers on the end that touch the camshaft. So I went through and I checked all of them to make sure there was no weird wear going on. And I checked both sides here. Pulled the caps there and checked those. So everything from what I am seeing, there's some, if you're seeing these marks right there, it's just dirt. That's, I shouldn't say dirt, but grime that I'm still cleaning up off of there. And you know, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I laid everything out the exact same way I took it out. So when I go to put it back, I know some things I have to replace, like the head bolts I believe need to be replaced. I'm gonna look into that. And then yeah, I think that's as far as I'm gonna go. I know I have to pull the pan, so I'll be able to look at the bottom side of it, just so you guys can see it does. Everything seems to move nicely, and I don't see any weird wear patterns or anything. I won't lie, this is a lot more than I thought I was gonna do. I thought, you know, ultimately I was just gonna put the engine, you know, I bought one. I have proof that it runs, and I was just gonna put it right in here. But after finding the burnt or melted port on the intake manifold, and then now finding a bent rod. I don't know if you can see that still, but it is oh, it'd help if I showed you the right one. It would have been this one. It is bowed. Don't know how much that costs or would cause, but we're gonna look into that a little bit. I also didn't realize how much extra fluids were in the engine. Good thing I have some kitty litter laying around because I went and made a mess. But now I know for the future. All right, that's the end of today's video. So have a great night, and we'll see you guys later.